Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for downtime. So, yeah, we're gonna start a little early because, well, it's in time, not on time.
Hi, my name is Seth Andrews, and this is In Time.
All right, buckle up, folks. I have a feeling it's gonna be one of those nights. Oh dear Lord. Thank you for joining us, Lance. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting week.
I don't know. Let's see here. There may be a little bit of an echo, and I think I can probably fix that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to attempt to fix the echo. In so doing, I may inadvertently disconnect the stream, connect to Pornhub, or launch tactical nuclear. There's any possible number of outcomes to this, although I will say, okay, well, that would explain it. I guess the headset's dead. So, yeah. All right, well, so in terms of what's made today interesting, or been an interesting week, anything in particular you had in mind?
Oh, just personal stuff, really. It's nothing international or national scene kind of news things. Although there's plenty to talk about, but
yeah, I sent you that picture of all of Russia as East Ukraine. And there's a meme.
That was cute.
There's a meme that was floating around the last time they managed to make just amazing progress, and it was like it's the president going, Zelensky, he's like, no, I said Crimea, and they're in Moscow. They're like, yes, Moscow, we've taken Moscow. It's like, no, I said Crimea. Oh. All right, let's see if that helps with the echo. All right, so, well, it seems like despite my best efforts, everybody can hear, and so welcome. Thank you all for joining us. And, oh, dear Lord, so, yeah, I don't know. What do you, I mean, Ukraine does have the ability to surprise, and
oh, yeah.
I think nobody really saw this coming. Last I heard, they were expecting that there were 2 battalions in that area, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's 10. And they managed to have made some progress. They are currently holding it, and Russia is actually withdrawing troops from the front to
try to stabilize things. Yeah.
If you had to make any guesses, well, you were about to say something. I'd rather hear what you're going to say first.
It's not battalions, it's brigades. So,
thank you.
A battalion has, give or take, 800 or 900 men in it. A brigade has 4,000 to 4,500 men in it. So much bigger.
So there's a slight difference.
So the latest estimates are somewhere between 40 to 50,000 Ukrainian troops are involved in this offensive in Kursk Oblast. So it's a big thing. Nobody has quite figured out what the real intent of this operation is. There are a lot of benefits to conducting this operation, but what their initial goal was is hard to say. The benefits are obviously you take terrain in Russia that puts pressure on Putin and the rest of the oligarchy to think about negotiations. If negotiations occur, then you now have a bargaining chip to say, well, we'll give you back this part of Kursk Oblast if you give us back X. It's kind of a big deal militarily because it puts a salient right into the middle of the Russian lines where they can go north, south, or continue kind of going northeast as if they were going towards Moscow. If they go north, they go into Belgorod Oblast. And what's interesting there is that's one of the two main supply hubs for the Russian operations here. So if you take that out, it means everything.
Are you telling me the Russians are supplying their troops?
Well, within reason. I mean, something has to come out of the guns they're shooting. So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Food, water, those are irrelevant.
All right. So there are bullets getting there somehow. But
yes.
That's about it. Oh, all right.
So, but if that gets neutralized, and you don't actually have to take Belgorod, you can simply just cut the rail line that goes to it, and it forces all that logistics to relocate down to Rostov, which is the other main rail hub they're using, which is already overburdened. Now it's going to be doubly so. So it really stresses them logistically, and that kind of means no offensive operations from the Russians until they get that thing squared away. So from that perspective, it's good. If you go the other direction, you go into Bryansk, while it's not as important, it again is a big bargaining chip. It's important to understand these three cities and the oblasts with them are kind of like number 30, 31, and 32 in terms of size ranking within Russia's cities. So I kind of did some rough, back of the envelope calculations. It would kind of be the equivalent of the U.S. losing all of Western Washington and Portland, Oregon. So not something most governments can ignore when it happens.
Not trivial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I imagine even for Putin, containing that kind of news is challenging. They can probably slow it down quite a bit, but stopping it, I don't think is going to be possible.
Right. The other thing that's interesting is there's a nuclear reactor in Kursk Oblast, and while I suspect the Ukrainians don't want to take it, because then you have all sorts of security issues of trying to protect it and keep it from, having a meltdown or whatever. Simply isolating that from the Russian power grid creates logistical problems for the Russians, because 70% of their rail traffic, and again, most of the Russian logistical system for the armies is being carried on rail. You take that power plant out, and it puts kind of a power dead zone in that middle area, so you can't run locomotives to and fro with all those vital supplies. So again, that accomplishes some pretty interesting stuff too.
Well, that almost to me sounds like, believe it or not, the most important of all of them, because while you'd think cutting off the supplies, which would have a deleterious effect overall, it wouldn't stop it completely. But if they're already overloaded with the second one, I have to believe if you cut rail traffic, that would include, passenger trains. Once again, making the war a lot harder to deny for Putin.
Yep. And I think that's another interesting aspect, is that apparently word of this, while it's hard to contain it, is kind of leaking out. But the Russians are doing an interesting thing to downplay it. Mm-hmm. Rather than calling it a military incursion, they're calling it a counterterrorism operation, which makes it seem much smaller, much less important, something that, basically the SWAT team from the police can handle. And I'm sorry, but 40 to 50,000 terrorists with tanks, artillery, and air support. That's a little bit of a stretch for that definition.
Well, listen, all of this is just a military. What is it? It's a military operation in the first place.
Special military.
Special military. So now this is a special military counter operation.
Yeah.
Their penchant for naming things. Karl Rove would be proud.
Oh, definitely.
Dear Lord.
So
yeah.
One of your people on the chat stream here said, at what point does Putin just push the big red button? He needs to be under direct threat, personal threat from that, for that eventuality to occur, I think. So if NATO stays out in terms of conventional forces, that I don't think is likely to occur. Putin's biggest threat right now, honestly, is the political threat from his fellow oligarchs. And it's important to remember that most of these guys are in it for the money. They've been raping Russia for every penny they can squeeze. And with the sanctions in place, they're losing money every day. So they're not going to be happy. They want to see this thing come to a conclusion, but at the same time, they're also Russian imperialists. So they don't want it to end with Russia in a disadvantaged position. So it's an interesting dichotomy, as they want to support the war, they want it to go well, but at the same time, they're starting to get squirmy in their seats because things are getting a little uncomfortable. And the worse it gets in that perspective, the more pressure somebody's going to be under to say, okay, it's time to make Vladimir go away.
Yeah, so basically we're talking, open window trauma, deceleration, poisoning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I think the other thing that's interesting is, from a strategic perspective, Russia wants to get Ukraine back. There was some speculation, why is Russia so big on, why is Ukraine important to them? And somebody said, well, it's the people because they're Slavic people. No, that's not really the big deal. Well, they want the soil because it's such fertile ground and it's what they use to feed their people. And well, no, not really. They have enough other areas that they can feed their people with. In fact, they export grain even after Ukraine became independent. What it really boils down to is geopolitical positioning. And I think Brzezinski, who was the U.S. National Security Advisor under, I think, Reagan, is the one who said it best. He said, Russia without Ukraine is no longer an empire. And I think that's what's going on, is to the Russians, when the wall came down and they let those republics go independent, not just Ukraine, but a whole bunch of them, it's kind of it's giving up the dream of empire. And Russia has, kind of like China has, this view that they are a superior people who are destined to, rule the world, or at least their portion of the world. And losing Ukraine is an acknowledgement that that dream is effectively over. So that, I think, is the driving ambition here, is to take back those lost areas, to resume being one of the global superpowers. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of, Ivan in the street Russians even with all the problems that are going on inside Russia right now, still remain pretty loyal to Putin, because he's kind of bringing that dream of reviving the Russian Empire, the Russian spirit, the Russian ethos, whatever you want to call it. He's bringing it back to life after Gorbachev gave it away, if you will.
Well, and was it Gorbachev who also ceded Crimea? I thought that was something or was that Yeltsin?
That was all part of. It was always part of Ukraine when they seceded.
Okay. I thought Crimea was like returned separately, where there was a separate declaration where it was returned back.
There was a bunch of debate that went on when the USSR was breaking up over who legitimately owned Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the decision was made it doesn't have a direct connection to Russia, it connects to Ukraine, ergo it is part of Ukraine. So that's the way it went. And they had to negotiate special arrangements where the Russians were allowed to maintain their naval and air basing facilities in Crimea because it was so heavily part of their Black Sea presence. Eventually they were told, no, we'd like you to go away. So they pulled everything out, went to Novorossiysk, and then, of course, you have no, we'd like our peninsula back. Thank you very much.
So, in Putin's mind, and we've had this discussion before. So, first of all, Putin is very much a child of the Cold War and the Soviet Union, and a lot of analysts have said that they think that really his ego has not been able to accept the failure of the Soviet Union, and that he's basically trying to reconstitute it. And the best place to start, as you had suggested earlier, would be Ukraine.
Well, it's not just Ukraine. They've had little squabbles down in the Caucasus region too, between Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan. All of those are trying to reassert control over that area. So it's more than just Ukraine. It's interesting to me that Putin initially was a fairly low-level operative in the KGB during Soviet times. And I think, like a lot of patriot Russians, fervently patriotic Russians, he felt betrayed. It's kind of the same kind of thing you saw in Germany with the old stab in the back after World War I. We would have won World War I if it hadn't been for the civilians and the Jews and the bankers and the intelligentsia stabbing us in the back and ending the war prematurely because our army was still fighting valiantly in the field, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that Putin, like many other mid-level Russian professionals in the bureaucracy and military, did feel some sense of betrayal that, here's this dream that I've been devoting my life to, and it's snatched out from under me.
Yeah.
And then as he rises into power and, becomes first among equals with other members of the ex-KGB intelligentsia group, he starts seeing or thinking that he can restore Russia. He can, make things better. And it's the same kind of thing, the rhetoric, honestly, that you saw and heard with Hitler in the 30s. And it resonates with a significant portion of the population. And that's how he was able to literally win elections and get himself into power. And then, like Hitler, his immediate move after that was to start eliminating all political competition. And I think right now, if you pay attention to some of the headlines, I think he's in the kind of night of the long knives phase of what the Nazis did, which is that point where you're secure in power, but there are all these other potential rivals around you within the party, and it's time to make them go away because they're your greatest immediate threat. And that's why you see so many of these people accidentally falling out of windows or suffering sudden heart attacks, that kind of thing. He's purging that group that pose a threat.
I get a little, I've been trying to sort of think about this. At some point we'll have to have an interesting discussion on rhetoric, because I don't want to compare Trump to yeah, you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
but
it's a dangerous alley to go into after dark.
Well, but you take a look at Project 2025, and it's like, okay, prosecute all my political enemies.
No.
As soon as you said, I'm just like,
it's Mein Kampf in English for a modern age.
Yeah. It's and
as with Mein Kampf, when people read it back in the 30s, it's like, yeah, this is the ravings of a lunatic. We don't need to pay attention to him.
And the number of people that I've heard that have said that, they're like, oh, it's so big, nobody's really going to try to implement it. And also, I'm like, they're literally saying, we're going to try to implement this. I mean, they've said this. In fact, they don't say try. They say, well, this is what we're going to do. Here's our playbook in case anybody's interested. And I'm like, we don't teach history well enough, I think, in schools. I'm just going to say
also important to remember that Project 2025 was not supposed to be something we could all see. Yeah. It got leaked by an insider. So, unlike Mein Kampf, where you publish it and tell everybody, here's what I'm going to do, this was oops, now they see our secret plan. So, that's why you get all this disavowal. Well, Trump was not involved in the preparing of this document. He had no idea this was going on. This is just the random musings of some of the more fanatic members. And but why does it mention his name like 800 times throughout the document?
And Sinister Porpoise brings up an excellent point, but this, in my view, is almost more scary, less apropos of the German example. But Trump did not come up with Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation did, which is almost worse because the Heritage Foundation is the right-wing conservative think tank. I mean, it is the one.
It's the American oligarchy's think tank, and I think that's the important distinction we need to make.
Yes.
To them, Trump is, as Hitler was to the German industrialists, a useful idiot that they believe they can control.
Much better said than I would have said it. I'm going to take credit for that. So and Sister Porpoise, Trump is literally the useful. Exactly. They figure that they're smarter.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Sister Porpoise. I think that's absolutely correct. Speaking of Trump, people have been thinking, okay, so he did that slurred speech thing, and somebody had said that, well, there had been an interview with sort of members of his inner circle and one of purportedly his friends who said that he's watching the video of how close that bullet came. And essentially what happened was, and I posted one of the videos, but I didn't post the really professional one that was done, where basically just a second and a half before the shot was fired, he kind of leans in forward. Then he turns his head, so he's actually moved the center mass of his head has moved by quite some bit, and then he gets clipped in the ear. But if his head had been, it would have been a perfect headshot if he hadn't done either of those two things. So he's apparently playing that 7 seconds of footage just over and over and over and over again. And The friend apparently was concerned that he might have PTSD. And I'm sitting there going, might have? As much as we like to demonize Trump, he's a human being. And after an assassination attempt like that, you're going to have PTSD. I have zero doubt in my mind that for all his bluster, he's rattled. I mean, that was the sheerest, narrowest of luck.
Oh yeah,
that he survived. So there's now rumors that he's actually trying to tank his own campaign. You know, I think we've all sort of believed he never wanted to be president in the first place, and it's just been ego that's been fueling him since then. You're not going to tell me that you're better than me, that I can't do it, and I'm going to fail, yada yada yada. And now he's sitting there going, you know, hey, how badly do I?
This
really
is
want
dangerous.
Nobody told me that. Yeah, well, I think he really does think that like the snipers are all theater, and it's all just like, you know, it's you know, The Apprentice, you know, government edition, where he's just sort of like, you know, I'm gonna, you know, tell you that sniper's no good, he's fired, you know, and then he realizes that no, that sniper's there for a reason, and it's also interesting because he's been shitting all over the Secret Service. Certainly the intelligence communities like crazy, including the FBI, CIA, and so I have to believe part of him's like, oh shit, this is a real thing. This isn't a game, and this isn't television. So I don't know if that's just something where his ego is going to kick back in and say, yeah, but I'm Donald Trump. Of course, nobody's ever going to hit me. I mean, it's going to be, you know, or you know, does he continue to spiral?
I am God's anointed. He doesn't believe it, but his followers will certainly believe it if he says it.
Oh God, yeah. I've seen that. Have you seen the memes of Jesus literally?
Oh yeah,
moving the bullet? And what I love about that is someone's like, okay, yeah, Jesus moved the bullet to hit the retired fireman who's protecting his family. Yeah, because that's, you know, thanks Jesus. But at any rate, I don't know. Do you think that this has had much of an effect on Trump, or if it has, do you think that effect is permanent in any way, or permanent by the duration of the rest of the campaign?
I think it has rattled him. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's got PTSD. He certainly has been stressed, but I don't think it's, you know, caused any massive waking up with nightmares kind of scenario. He's too much of a malignant narcissist to let that happen. He's convinced that, you know, he's the center of the universe, and if he didn't get shot, well, obviously that's because fate has decreed that he has greater things in store for himself. That's the kind of guy he is. I think what we're seeing, though, is that rattling projecting through into some of his speeches. Now, if you go back as little as like 2 or as long as 2 years ago, his speeches were already starting to get really off the rails, unhinged. So I don't know if we can credit the latest word soup as being part of that post-assassination stress, or is it just Trump's natural mental state when the Adderall starts wearing off?
So a friend of mine has gotten really upset with the Biden debate and said, you know, why didn't they give him the drugs? You know, the drugs, they give him the Adderall or whatever it is that's going to make him, you know, perform better, because he was horrible. I was like, what makes you think they didn't? I was like, this may very well have been Biden on the best. I mean, there's, you know, I have to believe they did give it to him. This is the best you're going to get out of Biden.
Yeah. No.
Adderall and all.
There have been people that, you know, have worked closely with him and say, yeah, he's on a whole mix of wacky mental type drugs. His doctor, who has been his personal physician, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's actually been decertified, but he's still acting as his private physician. So somehow he's getting prescriptions filled to continue the drug regime that he had him on. And it's like the same thing that you see with Hitler towards the end of the war. He was on, he was essentially a meth addict.
I hadn't heard that part.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, you know, whatever it takes when you're, you know, yeah. Let's see. So there's another good question in the live chat. Okay, so there's been also an uptick in going back to his rhetoric. It was funny because it was a short while ago. It goes, you know, you don't need to vote for us. We got enough votes. Don't vote for us. I've never heard the other day say that on national television before, or whatever you call Fox News. But he was just, you know, you don't need to vote for me. I got enough votes, and I'm just so like that's the ego getting way ahead of the intellect by that point, because that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But he's now starting to talk about, oh, they're going to try to steal it from us, and for whatever reason he got really. It seems to have thrown him, and he feels cheated that Biden bailed. Any thoughts as to, I mean, I think it's because he's very aware he may really genuinely lose to Kamala, and I don't think Biden had a chance. So I think it's just sour grapes. But
I tend to disagree. I think Biden had a chance, but it was, you know, one of those flip the coin and see which way it lands. With Harris, I think the situation is much more clear cut that he does not. He being Trump, he does not have much of a chance anymore.
Vegas now has Harris winning, so that's. I always like going to the what are they called? The places where you can sort of bet on anything and bet on the real life odds of either presidential candidates or whatever it is. I always like going to those and seeing what they say, because half the people who do that, more than half the people who do that, lose their shirt because they have no idea what they're doing. But the ones who make it, there's enough that have really researched it. There are people on there who do make money because they've really researched it, and I assume that those numbers are always going to be skewed because of the people who just like, oh, this is easy, and then they lose their. But there's enough there who know what they're doing that I like seeing the figures from people who are genuinely willing to put their money where their mouth is. So and that has moved decidedly into the Harris column. So and they still haven't had the
I think
thing yet.
Some of Trump's latest wackiness really is more just because Harris is there than the assassination or something. I think that really threw him for a loop. I get the impression he's one of those guys who, you know, this is the way it's going to be, and he mentally prepares himself thinking this is what's going to happen. And when something diverges even slightly from his predicted, I came up with this prediction of, you know, how I'm going to win. When it slightly diverges, it makes them completely off their rocker. And they can't deal with it. And when you get something that's this big a divergence, it's like blah, 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 blah. It takes them significant amount of time to reorient themselves. It's, you know, you got to hit the reset button on the computer.
Good to see. I know Neil's talking to Dick. They haven't seen each other in a while. Good to see both Dick and Neil. Neil, it's been a long time too. He and I chatted a few times, which was really nice of him. But good to see you, Neil. Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think that's part of his need to. It's bizarre the things that he needs to control and the things that he doesn't. I remember the first time around with Eric. Don Jr.'s pitch to potential VP candidates is, how would you like to be the most powerful VP in history? Because the idea being, of course, that Trump didn't want to run anything. You know, he just wanted to be sort of a figurehead, and the VP would be doing all the heavy lifting. So, but
I think honestly, Trump expected when he first got elected that it was going to be, you know, ceremonies, cake cuttings, ribbon cuttings, and playing a lot of golf with bigwigs. I think he had no clue what a freaking hard task being president is.
And yet he's trying to do it again.
Yeah, but his driving motivation in life is money. It always has been. And I think he just figures when he's president, the money comes flowing in. And I think that's a lot of what's going on with his mental process is if I can get back in that position, the money will start flowing again. Because, I mean, give you an example. While he was president, the Saudis, the Russians, and any number of groups were renting entire floors in his hotels. Nobody was staying there. It was just that was a way of funneling money to the man to get in, ingratiated with him. And the moment he lost the election, everybody gave up their lease and the money stopped. And he's still paying the mortgage on that place. So I think that's a lot of what goes on in his mind is, if only I can get back in this seat, I can find ways to steal out of the coffers and make myself wealthy again. And the legal fees will all cease because I no longer can be tried and that kind of stuff.
Well, that was the other one, which was when he gave his sort of impromptu speech on Kamala and sort of was defending Democrats. He's like, "You poor Democrats, you've had your choice stolen from you. I feel so bad that the citizens had picked Biden," and he's going like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But okay, but he genuinely struck me as scared. And I'm wondering if that's because of what you had said earlier in your view, that he, or I'm wondering if in your view that's because of what you had said earlier, which is that the circumstances just changed and he was still trying to adapt and he was just like, the whole world's gone topsy-turvy, or because now he's sitting there going, the chances that he won't become president and he won't be able to pardon himself have gone up dramatically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Somebody was commenting, well, if he's president, he won't be under house arrest. I don't think he's going to be under house arrest regardless. And he's already said if he loses the election, he's hopping on a plane to Venezuela and never coming back. And I think to some degree that's true because he's terrified that something will happen along those lines. He may not go to prison, but even house arrest would just grate on him. And I think he wants to get out of that. So he'll go into a gilded exile somewhere.
I hadn't heard him say that.
Yeah, he did. He said, yes, Venezuela has no extradition treaty. That was why that was the name they mentioned. He didn't say, I'm going to Venezuela. He said, I think if I lose the election, and this is a paraphrasing, if I lose the election, I'm going to leave the country, maybe go to somewhere like Venezuela. And the implication was somewhere without extradition.
A, I thought they had his passport. I could be wrong. B, speaking out your intentions aloud is a great way to hear God laugh.
Oh, yeah.
Having said that, nobody's done anything about it. I mean, he's just been there like, we're going to have camps. We're going to have beautiful camps. We're going to take everyone who isn't an American and we're going to put them in camps. It's going to be great.
The cleanest gas chambers you've ever seen.
Yeah. All the gas chambers will run on time.
Lord.
Well, it's funny. I was watching a right-wing podcast, and they were like, the rhetoric out of the left, and I was just like, yeah, but, and then on the flip side, it's like, I don't know. It's hard to. It's not like I want to believe that he's capable of these things, but I believe he is capable of these things, and I believe he's basically said it more than once that that's his intention. Yeah. And I think you kind of have to take people seriously when they say something like that.
And I think a lot of his rabid followers view life through that prism that they are righteous and everybody who is not them is evil incarnate. I was listening to somebody having a interview slant debate with, he has very liberal views, and the guy he was talking to was, a very devout Christian. And he was asking, why do you guys have such unwavering loyalty to Trump when he's got all these other things? And he says, well, because he speaks for us. He's talking, about things that are major concerns for us, like our kids going to schools where they are forcibly indoctrinated into gay and transgender politics and so forth. And what's the other one? Critical race theory and such.
Oh, yep. Yeah, that's a big one.
And the guy said, okay, first off, none of that is done in schools as part of the curriculum. Secondly, are you saying that you people aren't doing it with mandating that, the 10 Commandments must be posted, the people, the students must pray every day, that kind of stuff? That's indoctrination. Why is your indoctrination okay and ours bad, even if there was indoctrination on our side, which we don't believe there is? Well, that's different. And that, I think, is the key, is that they are so full of themselves, they can't view the world through anything other than their prism. They can't see the other person's side.
So what happens? This is the question, is there such a thing as being too reasonable, and how do you know when you're being too reasonable? So how do you know if you're trying to be reasonable, if you're trying to be inclusive, at what point do you say, okay, no, it's the old, you don't tolerate intolerance. So, okay, so how or where do you know that line is drawn, do you think?
It's hard to say. And honestly, I think that's what local school boards are for.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons that in so many parts of the country, the Christo-fascists have taken over school boards, because they want to change things. They believe that if they can, I won't say pollute the minds, but cleanse the minds of the young, that all of this lefty nonsense will go away. And they don't see that as indoctrination. They see it as something completely different. So school boards are an important part of it, but you have to have people get involved and stop just going, okay, I'll vote for the guy who's running for president, maybe the person who's running for senator, state representative, but anything down ballot from that, lots and lots of people literally don't do anything. So you end up with the group that has somebody who stands up every Sunday and tells his congregation, you must vote for Jim Smith because he's the only one that's going to do right by us. And everybody else who just kind of goes, I don't care. So those elections get won because people don't give a shit.
And that was actually, Rove, unfortunately, really knew what he was doing. Rove said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is start targeting the governors. And everyone's like, who gives a shit about governors? Who gives a shit about governors? It's like anybody who cares about congressmen, because governors draw the maps that get the congressmen elected. And if you care about congressmen, then you care about governors. Well, who cares about congressmen? Anybody who wants to get a president elected, because if you get enough congressmen on your side, it just... Oh, yeah, Rove, yeah, it was just from the bottom up. $2, Sinister Porpoise, arm all transgender teachers. Yeah, I gotta say, that's gonna, I think the biggest, if we just had a campaign to arm all transgender, gay, lesbian, the whole.
Wouldn't that be fascinating if you use that as the excuse of, okay, you guys have been complaining that you need guns in classrooms to keep students safe. We think the normal people are not dependable enough, but what about if we mandate that anybody who's a gay or transgender must be armed in the classroom and they will protect the school? Watch them just shit themselves in public.
Well, and watch all of a sudden if like you're like, well, right now in our society, people who are gay and transgender have far more violence committed against them by the cis people than cis people by gay and transgender. So let's just for their own safety, we're going to help make sure that we're going to show them, make sure we're going to have programs to make sure they're all armed all the time, yes. and watch the right wing, the Republican platform be, curtail the Second Amendment. I mean, it's going to be like, just like we have to make sure. I mean, you can't just give guns to everybody. I mean, that's crazy. It's just, I swear to God, that's going to be. Mr. Dick Dawson, $6.99 Canadian. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. Hardline religious. Don't see anything info, but the word trumps all. I as someone who used to, as Dick knows, get into a lot of these debates, it's fascinating. You kind of do a reducto on any argument, and eventually it just comes down to the word or faith in the word, and that the Bible has said it, and therefore, and it's infuriating to how do you have a rational conversation with people who don't value rationality? I think that's a problem we've not yet been able to solve. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I don't think you can, honestly. I mean, when somebody has made their mind up and are convinced that their decision, their choice is the right one, and anything that goes against that is evil, dangerous, stupid, what have you, I don't think you can talk them into changing their minds for the most part. There are plenty of times when things will appear on a ballot that benefit people, and because folks are told, no, this is wrong, you shouldn't allow this, even though it would help them immensely, and they vote against it. Or conversely, somebody proposes something that would actively hurt their economic situation, and they vote for it. Those are the kind of people. They've made their minds up, and they're not going to change it because they're predisposed to not wanting to think about things. So many people in America think, life in America is about freedom of choice. And I would contend in many cases what people really are looking for is freedom from choice. They don't like having to be responsible for their own decisions. It's nice to have somebody else make the choice for them. And then if it goes wrong, you can blame that guy. It was never me. I knew what I was doing all along.
Or to some extent, our brains certainly, but just the way we operate is geared towards efficiency, and it takes up a lot less energy to find a person or idea that you can get behind and say, I'm just going to follow them, and they're going to speak for me, do for me, and whatever they say is just de facto right by definition. And I can just defend them instead of defending the entire litany of things that may or may not, and I don't have to understand whether or not global warming is real or how the science works, because they've said global warming isn't, so I can just sort of get behind that symbol, if you would get into, what is it? Oh, dear Lord. Joseph Campbell. who said that I think he had said that Jane Goodall had discovered that apes can't get in groups larger than 25. And the reason is because there has to be an alpha, and they have to be able to see the alpha, or, well, at first it was just that they had to see the alpha, and as long as everybody can see the alpha, they can stay in the group. But if one of them gets too far from the alpha that they can't really see the alpha, they're going to wander off into another group because they're just not under the sway of that alpha. But then it turned out that there were ways that the alpha could actually mark areas that helped remind you, symbols that helped remind the other apes that you are under the domain of this particular ape, whether it was scratches or marks on a tree or whatever. So, we have the same thing. We've got a flag so that if you're not looking at the president and you're not looking at the Constitution right now, at a minimum, you're reminded every time you see the flag. So I don't know. Slightly aside from where you were going with that, I think, but it got me thinking about that.
Yeah.
So Neil, good. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll definitely chat at some point. I probably owe Neil a coffee anyway. Let's see what else was in the news. I'm sure there's of course Israel. Israel's always in the news. And somebody suggested
Israel's interesting because I was expecting last week or even the week before the shit to really hit the fan, and it's pretty much gone quiet. I mean, after the targeted killings of the 3, Hamas officials, including one in Iran, everybody was expecting Iran would attack, Hezbollah would attack, Hamas would attack. And aside from some cross-border shelling, which is so common that it's almost non-news, out of Lebanon, there's been almost nothing going on. It's weird.
Well, I had proposed, and this may be this, so I'm always a little careful. So, like with my friends, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a military expert, because anytime I don't know the answer to something, I can just ask Lance, and he's a military expert. But, it had crossed my mind that Iran. I'd really like to know where Iran is on the nuclear deal. It seems like they genuinely would like to do it, but it also seems like they genuinely don't trust us. And why would they they what happened last time? So while I think they'd actually genuinely like it, and I think that's evidenced, in fact, just by the fact that they adhered to it the first time, we violated it. We failed to certify when we knew.
That's one thing that, regardless of all else, I will never forgive Trump for, is that we had a deal with them. They were at least making, some sort of prima facie effort to adhere to that treaty. I'm sure they were still carrying on research and development in the background, but that's fine. It wasn't overt. And the moment that Trump pulled out of that, everything went overt, and they're researching as fast and hard as they can.
And we've lost the ability to
monitor
or slow them down. Yeah, we've lost. Yeah. So I was curious if the U.S., which has, I don't even know how much power the U.S. really has, but if we went to Iran and said, listen, we really would like to negotiate this deal with you, which we've still been working on, is my understanding, but I haven't heard about it in a while. Is it possible that, we said, if you I think Joe Biden's policy is anything that gets Netanyahu either arrested or, 6 feet under is a good thing. That's my suspicion. And if a war breaks out between Israel and Iran, that actually helps Netanyahu. So I'm curious if the U.S. didn't say, look, it's not even in your best interest to really start a war. Wait until, Netanyahu's gone, and then we'll figure out how to do some form of reparations for what's happened here. And then we'll give you some kind of consideration as well in the negotiations going forward. Is that at all a possibility, or did I just pull all of that out of my ass? Because I've already told people this theory and made it sound like that this is at least plausible. So if I'm dead wrong, at least be gentle with me.
I wouldn't say you're dead wrong. I think it unlikely, but certainly a distinct possibility. So I know that's equivocation beyond a reasonable doubt, but there you have it.
So there you heard it, folks. The craziest theory you ever heard is technically not impossible, according to Lance. So I technically could possibly, maybe, in a couple of alternate universes somewhere, be right. So any thoughts as to why nothing has popped off?
I think the U.S. rapid reaction to putting stuff kind of in the way between the two countries gave Iran a reason to hesitate. And the longer they hesitate, the less likely it is that they'll do something, because the initial passion and reaction to what happened is going to have faded a bit. And, quote, saner minds will prevail. I think that's part of it. And I think from the other side, I think Netanyahu, who knows he's already on very shaky ground politically, if he were to decide to go ahead with the rumored invasion of Lebanon, he'd have to call up reservists. Israel's standing army is not large enough to do that. And more importantly, much of Israel's standing army is already committed to operations in Gaza. So they definitely need reservists. Reservists really do not like being called up, because they're all, they have their own jobs. And if they get called up, those jobs are basically closed. They aren't making money. They aren't getting their income. So they're getting paid some pittance for being in the army. And how long is that war going to last? 6 months? A year? Who knows? And they have no control over it. It's once they're in uniform, they can be there pretty much indefinitely if the prime minister decides that's what he wants to do. And doing that will build up enormous hostility and anger towards him. Even though there already is some, he at least has some degree of support. But the more he mobilizes and the longer people stay mobilized, the more that's going to erode. So I think both sides are looking at the picture saying, maybe we should not do anything. We can just, flex our muscles and look intimidating at the other guy.
Well, at least that's the option that they have now that has the fewest number of people dying. So if you're Netanyahu, the judiciary is what was the latest thing that they just did not that long ago? I mean, they
banging at your door is the word you were looking for.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So, what does he do now? He's religious, so pray to God is obviously going to be top of the list, because I don't see many other options. But if it's
he needs some ongoing crisis. So I think he will just continue to make the Gaza thing serve that purpose, because it has served well to do exactly that. Because it's something most Israelis can get behind.
All right. Do you think a year from now, 2 years from now, he's still in power?
I honestly can't say, because I think it really hinges on when is the next required election. I think he and his party, his coalition rather, are going to do everything they humanly can to prevent a snap election. So I think the election cycle has to come up. And my recollection is they had an election like last year or something. So I think we're looking at years before that will have to happen. So in theory, I think he can be in power for quite a while.
Oh, that's just beautiful.
Yeah.
So Titan sent me this. I'm going to see. It's been a little while since I've done these, and my hope is that you're going to be able to hear this. It's worth hearing. Donald Trump is on Fox News. This when did this air? It looks like about a couple hours ago. And this is him talking about what the hell that is going to happen if Kamala Harris wins. So let's see if we can.
And you're not going to be allowed. You're all going to be thrown into a communist
there you go.
system. It's a communist system.
This is insane.
Thrown into a system where everybody gets health care. It's
okay. I think I obviously did not get the right button for that one, so we're going to try that one more time. It's amazing how quickly you lose the skills if you're not doing it every single day. So let me.
And you're not going to be allowed. You're all going to be thrown into a communist system. It's a communist system. You're going to be thrown into.
Okay, Mr. Michaels is saying that the Israeli elections are for October 26th.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that I think he lasts at least until then.
That's not very long. All right, so what I'm going to do here is there is, of course, it doesn't take. They haven't invented the system yet that I can't find a way to break. So let me. This is interesting. I'm curious if people heard the audio of Trump at least talking, and I'm going to give it one more shot. Getting this up here. Oh, that would probably be the problem. I think I actually identified the problem with a decent chance successfully. So give me one more second here, and. So this is.
Titan says they can hear the audio, but it hasn't played to the end yet.
All right. Well, that is helpful. So what I'm going to do is snag the video one more time so that I've got a fresh copy of it. There it is. We will put it into the. Are they making fun of me? Never mind. Don't answer that question. I think I know.
They're figuring out ways to prank you.
Well, that ain't that hard either. So let's.
And you're not going to be allowed. You're all going to be thrown into a communist
All right.
system.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to full screen this here. So
I can hear it.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm gonna rewind it to the beginning.
It's really quiet though.
Really quiet. All right. I will also up the volume. So let me pause it just for a second and find the volume there. Oh, the volume. Oh, I know why it's soft for you. I lowered the internal volume for all of us, so you and I could talk while the music was playing. So I'm going to up that for both of us. So Sean, and of course that doesn't want to go up.
Go ahead and hit the launch button.
All right, let's do this.
Be thrown into and you're not going to be allowed. You're all going to be thrown into a communist system. It's a communist system. You're going to be thrown into a system where everybody gets health care. It's
so okay. So a lot of effort.
They can hear him.
A very
the audience can hear him just fine.
Okay, that's good. So basically what he was saying was that if Kamala Harris wins, we are going to be put into a communist system, a system where everybody gets health care.
What a tragedy that would be.
Let me, one of these days, I think I'm just going to have to sit down and like remember like, okay, that button does this button does that. Hey, we actually started early today, but don't tell anyone that's because I hit the wrong button, of course, again.
You know, you have to wonder if he has any idea of what communism is. No, I'm serious.
No,
my wife ran into something like this in one of her classes. Some kid was complaining, Obama's making us all into socialists. It's terrible. And she said, what's a socialist? He literally had no idea what a socialist was. Well, then why do you think that's a bad thing if you don't know what it is? Basically, it boiled down to he had been told by some commentator on Fox News that socialism was bad, therefore Obama was bad because he was a socialist. Just accepting blindly what his regurgitating sound chamber was telling him.
The reason I laughed earlier is because I'm fully aware that Trump has absolutely no idea what communism is or socialism or what the difference between the two is. Yeah. I'm reasonably sure he has no idea what a democracy is. He certainly doesn't know what a republic is or the difference between a democracy and a republic or which one we are. Oh, dear Lord. Yeah, I think that gets back into the the tribe mentality, the okay, we're going to follow the flag, which is Fox News. Rupert Murdoch has actually, I have to say this for him, he has accomplished words fail me. I don't want to the single most powerful media empire in human history. So he's accomplished something. If it were a force for good, I guess it would be a nice thing. But who knows what his sons are going to do with it? There's some indication that they may go in a more positive direction. But I'm not going to count my Murdochs before they've hatched. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
My experience, and I don't know enough about Murdoch to say specifically it applies to him, but in the cases where I've met somebody who is extremely wealthy, the person who actually made the money tends to be a fairly decent person. It's the kids who grew up in this entitled, privileged, pandered environment that somehow think that they're better than everybody else simply because they were born into this, and then think it's perfectly all right to shit on the rest of the population because they're not as wealthy as they are. And my guess is, that's not always the case, but I suspect his kids are going to just be following in line with dad. They're protecting their own moneyed interest.
And that the heirs to the Walmart fortune. Holy shit! Wow.
Enough said, dude.
Dude, you got it. And all of them. It's what born on third base and think they hit a triple. It's no, that's a point taken. Point taken. Well, it's rumored that I think his eldest son is reasonably liberal and has just been sort of biding his time, but wants to. But it's like every time it looks like they're put in charge of something, they certainly don't seem to deviate too much from dear old dad. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Sinister Porpoise. Trump was born on second base and thinks he hit a home run. Yeah.
A lot of truth to that statement.
No, that's yeah. Oh dear Lord! All right, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. I am a little tired. I'm not normal. My whole schedule. The other thing is, I'm still booking as if I'm on my go to bed at 4 a.m. schedule, and now I'm on my wow, is it 6 p.m. already? Wow. So I don't. Any final thoughts or anything you wanted to hit on before we head out?
Not really, because I haven't done enough research, but I know that there are some other conflicts going on around the world that kind of get short shrift simply because Ukraine and the Israeli thing are eating up all the airtime. And it, I think, would be interesting to delve into some of those. I know that interest for small, obscure areas of the world tends to not be high, but I think it's important to realize how unfortunate some people are just because of where they happen to have been born.
I think I used this argument before. It's a common argument. Like when I'm talking to particularly misogynist guys, I like to go for the argument. Look, and you say women's lib because it's a dated term, and they'll get it. That's the only fucking term they're gonna get. So you say women's lib is the best thing ever happened to men. Best thing ever to happen to men. And the number of reasons that you can list, just goes up, and you go through all the reasons that guys don't think of why equality is genuinely in everybody's best interest. But one of the ones that always boils down to is we know enough about biology now to know that men and women are identical in terms of their IQ and all this other good stuff. So the question is, how many Einsteins have been born female in the history of humankind and were relegated to, whatever.
Washing dishes and...
Yeah. How many Louis Pasteurs, how many people who could have genuinely made all of our lives significantly better, but because they were born a little black girl in Africa, nobody's ever heard of them, nobody's ever gonna hear of them. It's sort of like, if we bring all that up, if we bring all of the resources to the table, makes my life better. It's like
growing up overseas as I did, that was one thing that took a while. As a kid you don't think about it, but as I got older in high school period, you started realizing how damn lucky I was simply to be born male and American. To say nothing of the fact I was born in a reasonably, economically well-off family, but just those two things that you have no control over, how big an impact it has had on my existence. And at the same time, how unfortunate it is for people who don't have just that ridiculous advantage of sheer happenstance. And it really makes you feel for people that, you don't have any ability to really help them per se, but who don't have the luck that we did.
And there's one more that does not suit to your point quite as much, but is for me just almost as fascinating. By many respects, you are more powerful than Rockefeller, because while you have less money than Rockefeller's son died of an illness, I forget what it is, but is now easily treatable. Back then, all his money didn't couldn't bring a treatment to save his son's
Yeah.
life. So
Yeah.
when you take a look at, you're also in the most prosperous time as well. If you had been born 100 years ago, even all of the statements that you just said, being born white American and with a family that's got some means, meant a lot less 100 years ago than it does today. So it's if
It's
it
tough
doesn't,
realization for many people to cross that threshold and realize that you had no real control over many of the key things that decided your fate.
including what base, most especially what base you were born on, first, second, or third. The greatest single predictor of how well you do in life is where you start. That's it. Single greatest predictor. If you want to know whether somebody's going to die wealthy, successful, yada, 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 best predictor isn't education, isn't it? It's where were they born and when. And I that gets back to, that's something that nobody wants to think about. And I get why that can be, kind of depressing if you decide that, like, you're stuck in the either I feel like I have to do something about it, or I'm going to feel like, I'm a schmuck because I don't have to do about something. Or I can, squirrel. And the squirrel option does tend to be the preferable one, and I it's not like I don't understand why, but you still have to look at yourself in the mirror too, presumably. But religion does help with that. That's one of for me, that's one of the saddest things about organized religion is the amount of waste that goes into trying to help people because God will fix it all in the end, so it doesn't necessarily matter. It's okay that people are starving to death because they're going to go to heaven, and God will sort and do all this, and it just makes it easy to ignore suffering. Yes.
There's another aspect that I think a lot of people don't ever consider, and it's a perceptual one. And I will relate an instance. I don't know if I've told you about this one before. My dad was trying to recruit a guy from, I don't remember what country. Well, let's for the sake of argument say Congo. Okay. He was a university student, and they were just trying to sound him out, see if he might be somebody that was recruitable to CIA as an intelligence asset. And so he befriended him and, had him over for dinner and talked to him and went out to places and so forth. And one of the things he asked, he said, I think America tries to hide how bad they treat the blacks in this country. And you and everybody else, you make a point of never taking me to the black areas of town. My dad said, okay, you want to go see the black areas of town? I will take you there. So they got in the car, and we were living in D.C. at the time, and I don't remember what part of D.C., but it's the very low income inner city kind of place. And he took him down there, and they're driving through. And the guy's looking out the window, his mouth agape. He can't believe it. And as they were leaving, my dad said, so you see how bad it was? And the guy said, what do you mean bad? My dad said, I don't understand. He said, in my country, people living in buildings like that, who have cars, who have, nice clothes like this, who obviously are at least getting 1 or 2 meals a day, those are the middle class. And here, they have no pride in themselves. They don't care. They're just sitting there making no effort to improve themselves. And he was incensed. And after that, his viewpoint apparently completely changed on, liberal democracy is bad because you're allowing these people to just sit around and do nothing. He wanted them to get out there and work. And if they aren't working, forcibly do it. And that's because of his cultural perceptions of where he came from. And I think that's a part of something that people don't really make an effort to understand is that your vision of reality is based on your life experiences. And if you're confronted with something that doesn't fit in with that, it's shocking. It really throws you for a loop.
Like,
and
yeah.
And I was going to say, and to some extent, I suspect that's a bit of what's going on in some of MAGA world, is these are people who grew up in, small town America, and, they go to the big city and see things that are, oh, how can this happen? This is evil. We need to destroy it now. That kind of stuff. Because their eyes have not been open to anything other than their own little insular community.
Well, I think that is, I like that story, and I think that that's a good note to end on. I do think, we've discussed this before too, there's a reason that you find far more liberals and people who are open-minded in big cities, and it's because they get exposed to so much more, and they realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat, as it were. There's more than one way to do things, and just because it's not your way doesn't mean it's got any less value. So, all right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you again next time, and we'll have to see. This time really should work for me, but it's really we're still sorting things out, so we'll get that taken care of. We've got a Discord. I hope you guys will come in and join it. It's been very active, and there's still we were basically ready for breaking news at any time on Israel, and I've reached the point. So it's like I'm glad there wasn't any. So I'm just going to sit there and say, well, if we got that prediction wrong, we got that one wrong. Thank God. So thank you, Lance, once again for joining us. And I assume I think
pleasure.
I know that there's going to be a couple of shows coming up. There's going to be on the shills. There's going to be a couple of other things that I'm going to be doing. I don't have my schedule in front of me, but if you join us on the Discord, we'll let you guys know who's bouncing around where, because I think it's going to be a lot of stuff happening this weekend. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So look forward to that. And until then, we will see you guys next week. And thank you once again for joining us, and thank you for your support. Talk to you later.